Okay, yes, it is. Sorry about that.
No worries. Thanks, Kim. Glad we have this squared away. So now we are recording. And again, welcome to all of our members of the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission Homelessness Prevention Funds Committee, as well as any of members of the public that are joining us. We're calling our meeting to order May 20th at 1:07 p.m. And Kim, I'll invite you back in to go through any housekeeping items we have before we go into roll call.
Okay, thank you. Welcome committee members, liaisons, and members of the public to the Legal Services Trust Fund Homeless Prevention Committee meeting. Thank you for joining us. We are using Zoom with the goal to foster a more inclusive environment and effective meeting. If you would like to comment during the meeting, please use the raise hand feature. Please utilize this tool to virtually indicate that you would like to speak in order to help the chair facilitate the discussion. A friendly reminder, this is a video conference meeting, and please be aware of the surroundings behind you. All Legal Services Trust Fund Commission and committee meetings will be recorded and posted to the State Bar's website. Zoom captioning is available. To enable, select live transcript at the bottom of your Zoom screen and then select enable transcript. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. And now, Jennifer, if you wouldn't mind calling roll.
Sure. Alikani,
Here.
Iskin,
Here.
Mahoney, Sandville,
Here.
Escobedo.
Here.
We have quorum with 4 attending members.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. And as we always begin our meetings, I wanted to see, Kim, are there any members of the public wishing to speak on, provide public comment on agenda items?
Nobody currently has their hand raised.
Great. All right. Well, we will check in periodically as we go through agenda items, just in case we do have any members of the public. For those that are on, given our time, we will provide 3 minutes for public comment for members.
One member just raised their hand as soon as I finished speaking. Do you want me to allow them to talk or wait?
Sure. If we can unmute them, invite them to talk, we'll provide 3 minutes for public comment. And if you're speaking to a specific item on our agenda today, if you might reference that. And then, Kim, I'll ask you to just, if you can signal when we've got 3 minutes to make sure we can jump into our agenda.
Yeah, this is Kevin Asname with the Coalition of California Welfare Rights Organization, a frequent flyer, frequent attender. And when our item comes up, that's when we would like to be heard. Is that okay?
That's totally fine, Kevin. So we'll reserve your time for then, and we'll alert you when the item comes up.
We may need more than 3 minutes, but we'll cross over that bridge when we get to it. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. Great. So, barring any additional announcements or housekeeping items, why don't we jump into our, before we jump into the rest of our agenda items, our first item is approving our minutes from our last session on February 26, 2024. Any members of the committee have questions or requested corrections to those minutes? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes from our February 26th meeting?
Yeah, I'll move.
Eric? We have a second.
I second.
Thank you.
Jacqueline.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Jennifer, over to you.
Thank you. Alikani,
Yes.
Iskin,
Yes.
Mahoney, Sandville,
Yes.
Escobedo.
Yes.
With a vote of 4 yes and 1 absence, the motion passes.
Great. And now on to item 4.1 on our agenda, which is an update on our homelessness prevention grant admin. I'll invite Jennifer to present on the item. This is a non-voting item, by the way. This is an informational update for our members.
Thank you. Let me put that into presenter mode. Okay, this again is the update on Homelessness Prevention Grant Administration. My name is Jennifer Zelnick. I am the committee coordinator and a senior program analyst in the Office of Access and Inclusion. So just a couple of updates. We'll talk about the HP2 grant closeout, HP3 quarter 9 services and expenditures report submissions, the HP budget revision requests, and the HP3 audit update. So regarding HP2 grant closeout, the reports were due in early April. Staff are working on the final report to the Judicial Council and the grant closeout process. I did want to note a couple of items about this closeout. So CCWRO submitted a late and substantively incomplete report. Staff will report this to EBR in accordance with the resolutions that were passed last year by the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission. 3 other grantees were late and 5 grantees submitted incomplete reports. Most late reports were submitted within 1 business day of the due date, and grantees were able to correct their incomplete reports fairly quickly. Importantly, the 1 grantee, the National Center for Youth Law, did submit a report a week late. They explained that they typically store the deliverables listed in grant agreements on their CMS, and they failed to account for the report due date. They also noted that some of the staff who were involved were ill leading up to the grant report due date. So they have received technical assistance from staff to ensure that this doesn't happen in the future. And NCYL has reported that they have begun to implement additional steps to ensure future deliverables are submitted timely. And staff also checked to make sure that NCYL is receiving all State Bar emails in order to ensure that all communications are received. Okay, so now on to HP3. The quarter 9 services and expenditures reports were submitted by grantees. A few reports were late, but all grantees were communicative and submitted timely. Staff are not concerned about patterns of lateness at this time, but we would raise this if such a pattern arose. Staff submitted the HP3 quarter 9 services and the HP3 quarter 8 expenditures report to Judicial Council, timely. And just as a reminder, the reason that staff submitted the quarter 8 expenditure reports is because the expenditure reports are submitted to the Judicial Council a quarter in arrears. So we will be submitting quarter 9 soon. Okay, so moving on to the HP budget revision requests. Staff received several budget revision requests, but since we're presenting about that later on in the agenda, we're going to hold those for now and we'll present everything together. And then finally, just to give a brief update, as Dwan mentioned at the commission meeting back in March, our office is undergoing a number of audits. One such audit is from the Department of Finance. They are auditing our HP3 grant. As you all know, that grant uses federal dollars. So that audit has been ongoing now for several months. Staff are continuing to work diligently to get the Department of Finance those materials as requested timely. Are there any questions about this?
Thanks for the updates. Any questions from committee members? Jennifer, I had one question. We
Sure.
don't have questions from other members regarding closeout activities in the HP2 grant. Is there an ultimate final date by when all activities on, say, HP2 need to be closed by for the grants?
There is, and I am very sorry that I don't have that date off the top of my head, but we are making sure that we are completing all of that work timely. The report is due to Judicial Council, in the fall, but staff is working to get that report at least internally finalized, hopefully sooner. And part of the closeout process, as I'm sure everyone knows, is also to make sure that all of the expenditures are squared away. If there are any unspent funds, staff work with grantees to ensure that those are returned timely. So we'll continue to provide updates to the committee, but as of now, we are ahead of schedule on all of our requirements.
Thank you. Again, thanks for the updates and good luck with the new work on the audit. I see Dawn's here, so you are living the dream right now. Thank you for all your work. All right, so then if there are no other questions or comments from committee members, might we then proceed to agenda item 5.1, which is action on Coalition of California Welfare Rights Organizations 2021 through 2024 homelessness prevention grants. This is a HP3 formula grant. So I believe Jennifer and Heidi will both present. And in the agenda and materials you received, we did have a memo prepared by staff that provides further details into today's presentation. This is an action item today. So as we conclude our presentation and discussion on this, we will be entertaining a recommendation for a resolution from staff. But in the meantime, we will ask Jennifer and Heidi to present. And I am aware of that I believe Kevin has comments. So actually, Jennifer, if you don't mind, why don't we invite Kevin to provide his public comment, and then we'll move into presentation and then committee discussion and action. So Kevin, if you're with us, I know you requested a little bit more time. We're doing well on time. Do we have other members of the public other than Kevin wishing to speak on this item? Kim?
No one else has their hand raised, and I'll allow Kevin to talk.
Okay, so if Kevin, if you can hear me, and if it's okay and there are no objections from committee members, since the item does pertain directly to CCWRO, Kevin, why don't, if you're okay, we'll provide you 5 minutes to provide your comments. I am aware and know that you filed this morning a letter to staff as well for the commission. We're aware of that, but why don't we give you then 5 minutes to provide your comments, and then we'll move on to staff presentation of the item.
So I assume that our statement is part of the record?
I'll defer to staff since it was received this morning. I know is not part of agenda materials, but staff, do you want to just acknowledge whether that's been received and will be part of the record?
We don't post public comments to the website, but if you mean by part of the records, as in the committee is in receipt of it, then they have been sent. Every committee member has been sent the letter, the public comments.
And I can confirm that I received it this morning as well.
Hey, how about that? Okay, so we have 11 comments, and I could go through one by one.
However you would like to use your 5 minutes, sir. And then we'll go to staff presentation.
I'm not sure 5 minutes is going to do much for this.
Yeah. Well, rest assured, we have your letter. So we've gotten all of it, and we have everything.
The first one is said that that staff found that CCW was built without segregating time and activities. It has CCW also built both programs for non-qualifying activities. It isn't clear as to exactly what you're talking about. The only thing that we know about is the care cord, and we were billed $11,000 and we paid that back. So if there's something else that we allegedly billed for that was inaccurate, would be nice in the report to see that in black and white, so we could understand what we're being charged with, and how we could. In fact, it would be nice to get an advance notice, so maybe we could take corrective action. The second thing is that we're not keeping time by fund records, allegedly. We do, they did, the staff suggested that we come up with a timesheet to meet the federal requirements. We did come up with a timesheet, and our timesheet has 14% for my activities charged to HP3, and the appropriate amount for EF and IOLTA. I work 50, 60, maybe sometimes 70 hours a week. I don't sit down and say, oh, I've only done 14%, so therefore I shut down. It doesn't work that way. We're all salaried employees, and we do our work because this is a cause. This is not a 8 to 5 job. This is an 8 to 12 job. And it's taking a lot of time of us. HP3 is only paying 14% of my time. And I've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 meetings that we had to come to. Just about every meeting after July, we're on the agenda. And we have to do a lot of work to try to figure out what's happening, analyze it, have several meetings to respond to this. And often, we don't even know, says, number 3 says, staff provided extensive technical assistance. Yes, they did do 40 emails, telephone calls, and Zoom. However, to call them extensive and technical assistance applies to clearly explain. They wanted to know how to calculate. They never provide clear, exact, there's no clarity. When we, they just basically, they sort of talk in their own language, and we have no idea exactly what they're talking about. So it would be nice in the future for them to say, this is the problem, and this is and what's the proposed solution? How do we resolve this? In fact, we were told by staff that we can't tell you how to solve it. In fact, you have to figure that out. So it's this little game that goes on, and we come back to every meeting. And then it says that CCDL submitted above required materials by April 26th deadline. However, some of the materials were incomplete and others were inaccurate. What was incomplete? What was inaccurate? We have no idea. Due process requires that you give us an advance notice so we can take
1 minute remaining.
Say that again?
52 minutes remaining in time.
Oh, I apologize. Yeah. And so the basic thing is that, in a sense, it would be nice in the future to tell us exactly what the problem is, and maybe what the proposed solution is, so we can take corrective action and not come to this meeting every meeting. In fact, we've been here every meeting since July, and it gets to be tiresome. And I'll submit the rest of it for the record. And if anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Kevin. And again, I'll confirm that we have received your comment that you submitted in detail. So we have that as well as your comments today. Committee members, as I pass this on to Jennifer, I'll also just provide us a reminder that whether this or other organization, part of our role is in the compliance process. So I think expect that as we have these types of actions, they are within the process of grant compliance and reporting. And so even as we take up this presentation today, as you all know, we've discussed in previous actions, grant compliance, particularly under 2 CFR and for ARPA dollars, federal dollars, is an ongoing thing as we're receiving these reports and review and conduct desk audits. Things surface, they're brought to the commission, and we review, and if staff needs, as part of our oversight role action, they bring that up to us. So I think in recognition of your comments, Kevin. That we see this as part of the process. Please don't feel like it's singling you out. It's more of an ongoing need to apply what the federal guidelines are and the federal government's requiring us to do, and then staff needing to work with the commission as we comply with these grants. So for committee members, as you look at this again, remember this is part of an ongoing process throughout the life of the grant, which is our reporting and compliance part. And so as we do desk audits, findings come out, and we have to be updated on that and sometimes take action on that. So with that background and setup, Jennifer and Heidi, I'll turn over the presentation for 5.1 to you.
Thank you, Ephraim. So I just wanted to take a moment to introduce Heidi. I believe most of the commissioners know Heidi. Heidi is here today in her capacity as acting program manager, handling oversight of compliance. So we'll be co-presenting. Okay, so we'll go over some background, then we'll do a review of CCWRO's submitted materials. We'll talk about the federal requirements to which Ephraim just referenced, and then we have a proposed resolution. In the spring of 2023, staff identified problems with CCWRO's HP2 and 3 formula grants, namely that CCWRO failed to segregate activities and expenditures between the 2 grants, did not track actual expenditures by grant, reported and potentially double counted the same work for both grants, and reported some non-qualifying work. I'm going to pause here. I see that there are some other hands raised. Ephraim, I'm not sure if you wanted to take those hands now.
Is that committee member hands or hands from the public?
I'm not sure I can see them right now.
I believe this person is from the public.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say, yeah.
Yeah,
it's a
one
member of
is
the public.
another CCRW employee, I believe.
Okay, well, at this point, we've started our presentation, so we'll take public comments for 3 minutes per participant at the end of the presentation.
Okay. All right, so those were some of the issues that were identified. As we've discussed in previous meetings, staff has provided extensive technical assistance. In addition, the HP Funds Committee, the Eligibility and Budget Review Committee, and the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission passed a series of resolutions in order to try to get CCWRO to come into compliance with its HP3 grant, which again is a federal grant. On March 29th, the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission passed a resolution that determined CCWRO did not satisfy the Commission's December resolution and therefore remained non-compliant with federal grant requirements, required CCWRO to submit documentation monthly beginning in January 2024 to receive its remaining HP3 funds through monthly reimbursements until the Commission finds CCWRO has come into full compliance, required CCWRO to revise its HP3 formula grant on the Quarter 9 expenditure report, which was due for all grantees on April 26, to reflect actual expenditures, required CCWRO to provide revised, accurate, and complete allocation reports, accounting reports, spend down plan, and budget revisions also by April 26, and required CCWRO to participate in a second HP3 desk review in 2024. Heidi.
Hey there. All right, so we have reviewed the submitted documentation by CCWRO, and we have done a thorough review to determine whether it was accurate and complete. In regards to the submitted budget revision that CCWRO, submitted, its initial submission was only for 1 year, whereas the grant is a 3-year term, and all budget modifications require the full grant to be part of the budget revision. So through supportive assistance from the staff, they were able to resubmit that. We are not at a point where we're able to recommend its approval yet, because we do still have outstanding questions related to some of the budget categories that they are assigning specific expenditures to. So we have asked for additional supporting information so that we can evaluate the budget modification to determine whether or not we should recommend it for approval. So that is an ongoing process. We do require additional information still. And then, as was mentioned, they did submit their timesheets and their general ledger for the HP3 expenditures, as well as a request for reimbursement for expenditures related to their HP3 grant for the first quarter of 2024. Staff has evaluated all of those things, and we still have substantial concerns around the accuracy of the documentation. Yes, Eric?
Yeah, so as I recall at our last meeting, or one of the last meetings, we resolved to require that, I think as you just said, that their ability to get funds for 2024 was on a kind of month-by-month basis.
Correct.
We were going to submit documentation, we were going to review it. If it was adequate, we would then release the funds on a month-by-month basis. Have they received any funding for 2024 from the HP3 grant?
No, we still have questions about the accuracies of the documents they submitted for that 2024 period. So I sent them a request for additional information so that I could clarify the appropriateness of that request, and they have a deadline of submitting that. I believe it's by the end of next or this week, I want to say, so that we can finalize our analysis of it. There are concerns we have about the documentation that was submitted, so we may have question costs related to that submission.
So if I understand correctly, for HP3, they've received funding for what, 2022 and 2023, but not for 2024.
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay, so with the submissions that they provided their timesheet documentation. And one of the biggest issues with this grant compliance is the nature of their timesheets and whether or not they can be relied on as accurately reflecting the time worked by CCWRO. And with this submission for the 2024 documentation, they included I'm sorry, I should go to the next page, sorry. So they have included the timesheets they're using. And the timesheets that they submitted have instructions for their employees to follow on how to submit their timesheets. And so this is in table 1 here, this is an image that was part of their timesheet submissions that tells their employees to only enter sick time, vacation time, and program time. That's the total hours worked. And it instructs them not to enter anything into the shaded areas, and that the formulas will calculate the work performed by program. And then the employee is supposed to then sign the timesheet and forward to the supervisor. Next slide. And so this is one at the crux of the problem with the CCWRO timesheets is, if you'll notice here, this is a copy of the timesheet that the instructions were for. The areas in gray, there are the actual time worked by program. So you'll see there under the HP3 column, it's simply a formula that's in the Excel worksheet that takes the 13% or the 12%, as Kevin was referencing, based on a 40-hour time period and just plotting hours in there. So this is not a true reflection of time worked. You know, as Kevin mentioned in his statement, oftentimes they work more than the 40 hours, or, you know, and they're not reflecting their true time worked here. It's just simply a budgeted formula that is reflecting what they budgeted in their for their grant. And so this is problematic based on the CCW or the CFRs, which require actual time work to be recorded and actual time to indicate what is being spent on a program. And so these timesheets that are submitted for 2 out of the 3 employees who work on this program contain these formulas. and instructions. So we simply can't validate the time as being appropriate because it's formula based and it's not based on actual time work.
So I'm sorry to interrupt. So are you saying that you got maybe sheets like this for, let's say, 2 employees and they're identical? They just have
Well, they each have a different formula because they're each budgeted different in the thing. But so like this particular employees, I have the timesheets through December of 2024 already pre-filled out. So from January to 2024 through December 2024. So they've already projected her time worked on, for HP3 for time that hasn't occurred yet. So they're entirely formula based. So if you were to go into the Excel spreadsheet under week 1, HP2, it would take the total time worked times by, I can't remember if this employee is a 12% or a 14% employee, but it calculates the time worked by that program based on a formula, which is based on their budget, which is
So
not.
you would expect, instead of 5.6, 5.6, et cetera, you would expect to see different times for each week for actual time work.
Yes, and based on like how Kevin just said he works, I would expect not every week to be 40 hours. If it's 60 hours, 40 hours, 30, whatever their actual time worked should be the total time that's being evaluated. In addition, I would expect there to be some variability between the HP3, EAF, and IOLTIS, if they're truly tracking their time worked by program, which is what the requirement is. So yeah, Jason, I think Jonathan has a question. Jonathan, I did see you had a question.
I did, but you just answered my question. So I was going to ask the time that CCWRO input, is it based upon what they budgeted, but they're actually working more hours than that? And because they calculate their time in percentages and they're only reporting what they budgeted, that's where there's a disconnect. I'm just trying to understand.
Yes. So the requirement is that you report your actual time worked on the program. So if they work 60 hours and of that 60 hours, 10 hours of it was HP3, I would expect to see 60 in what they call that program time column and then 10 hours in HP3. Or in a week that they worked 40 hours, you have to have some reliance on the actual time spent. And the CFR is very clear that you cannot use if you use estimates, you have to do a correction and an analysis of actual time worked to true it up. And so despite many times explaining this concept to CCWRO, they continue to not understand that they cannot simply give us a budget-based timesheet and meet the requirements. Yes, Jacqueline?
Are other programs submitting actual time in the manner
So we've had many other programs who have also had this same issue where they have had to take a corrective action, and we have been able to successfully get them to a successful resolution where sometimes they've had to pay return, or mark funds as make an adjustment to their expenditures because they've over-reported. And that there is an allowance for that. And we have tried to counsel CCWRO on that process. But despite our best efforts, we've not been able to get them to a different outcome. We have been able to successfully get other organizations with the very same issue to a different outcome that we are satisfied with their ongoing compliance. But CCWRO, instead of making an adjustment, just keeps using the same sort of formula-based approach and maintains that they're satisfying the requirement when in fact they're not. Yes, Jacqueline.
So, yeah, Jacqueline.
Do the employees have to keep a record of and report any details about the actual work that they do? And is this part of the federal reporting requirements that they also document actually some details about what they're actually doing, the type of work, a description of the work?
Yeah, I can, Jennifer, if you want to fast forward to, I think it's slide 10, that's the federal requirement for, so this is obviously just a portion of the requirement that the federal government has related to the standard of documentation of personnel expenses. So charges to the federal awards for salary and wages must be based on records that accurately reflect the work performed. They must be supported by a system of internal control, which provides a reasonable assurance that the charges are accurate, allowable, and properly allocated. And then further down, it says budgeted estimates alone do not qualify as support for charges to federal government or federal awards, but may be used in the interim for accounting purposes, provided that the system for establishing these estimates produces a reasonable approximation of the activities actually performed. Significant changes to the corresponding work activity are identified and entered into the record in a timely manner. Short term, such as 1 or 2 months fluctuations between workload categories need not be considered for as long as the distribution of salaries and wages is reasonable over the longer term. And the non-federal entity's system of internal controls includes processes to review after the fact interim charges made to the federal awards based on budget estimates. All necessary adjustments must be made such that the final amount charged to the federal awards is accurate, allowable, and properly allocated. So this is, they are precisely in this section of budgeted expenses, which is permissible in the short term, but we've counseled them from their very first letter that they received to us that it's not, you have to make a correction based on actual time work and some sort of supporting documentation that can clearly identify either work performed. I mean, timesheets are the easiest way of doing that, but
yeah. Heidi, sorry
ahead,
to interrupt. I just wanted to call point of order. Just it strikes me, I think in the interest of the public and folks who may be viewing this, can I ask colleagues, can we allow the staff to go through the whole presentation and maybe you could jot down questions you have? Because right now when you jumped, I feel like it disadvantages the public if we're going back and forth for our own generative conversation versus them appreciating the full presentation. So if there's no objections to, as a point of order, would say, staff, if you could run through the whole presentation, and then we can jot down our questions. We'll hear some public comment, and then we can just dedicate the time to committee discussion on this before you present the resolution. So if there's no objections to that, why don't we go back to where we were, and then let's go through the presentation.
So slide 9, I think, Jennifer, is where we can start again. Okay, so in addition to the budgeted nature of the timesheets submitted, there are also several timesheet inaccuracies that are present in the majority of the timesheets that they have submitted. In this example here, I have added the column to the right, the available work hours. So if you notice in this, for this example, in the August 23 pay period that I was reviewing, the employee listed a total of 200 hours of total time worked. However, in that pay period, there's only 182 hours available, work hours available. And so this type of mistake is, like I said, the overwhelming majority of the timesheets submitted have inaccurate totals of time worked based on the pay period. In addition, they include no holiday time off, or it's unclear if they include holiday time off, because some people do list time off, but it's not clear if it's holiday time off, sick leave, or vacation leave. And it does appear that the overwhelming majority do not include their holiday time that paid. So it's not, we can't, with the data we have, we can't properly account for how much time should be charged to the HP3 grant, because the timesheets don't have an accurate reflection of total time worked and paid time off and whatnot. So the analysis, the calculation that you can do with the timesheets are inaccurate because they don't have the full picture of the information, and they're using often inaccurate denominators to determine the percentage of time. So with the basis of this being so questionable and it being the majority of their expenditures, it puts into question all of the expenditures, because the way the allocation is intended to work is that you have a pro rata share of your personnel expenditures that then gets apportioned to your other shared expenditures, like for example, office supplies and rent and whatnot. So we have not been able to successfully recalculate what the appropriate expenditures related to their personnel are because of all of these variables. And so therefore we haven't been able to fully calculate the non-personnel expenditures as well. And that is why we've requested additional information so that we can make a final determination about the appropriateness of the expenditures reported based on the information that they have submitted thus far. And so slide 10, we've already talked about. The next one. In terms of the requirement the CFR has for documenting the personnel expenditures, which CCWRO has not been able to meet, and that is at the crux of the issue. And so with that, I will turn it back over to Jennifer to go over the next slides.
Thanks, Heidi. Okay, so just going more into detail about the CFR, the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission has already imposed all of the below conditions through its previously passed resolutions. So 2 CFR section 200.208, subsection C 1 through 6, essentially says that if the State Bar determines that a grantee has failed to comply with the grant conditions, the State Bar can impose these additional conditions on the grantee to secure compliance, including requiring payments as reimbursements, which we've discussed today, requiring additional, more detailed financial reports, as we've also discussed, requiring additional project monitoring, which has been ongoing, requiring the grantee to obtain technical or management assistance, which we have provided, and establishing additional prior approvals, and that goes back to requiring payments as reimbursements. Since CCWRO has not come into compliance with all of the federal grant requirements, staff cannot recommend reverting CCWRO's remaining HP3 formula grant allocation to a lump sum payment. Instead, staff recommends that CCWRO continue to receive its remaining HP3 formula funds through monthly reimbursement payments in keeping with this section of the CFR. Additionally, as Heidi alluded to, staff will recommend disallowing costs once the final analysis is performed, and all disallowed costs must be returned to the State Bar. And now I want to draw our attention to another section of the CFR, specifically 2 CFR section 200.339, which essentially states if the State Bar determines that noncompliance cannot be remedied by those additional conditions, the State Bar may take further steps as appropriate, which may include disallowing funds, as we discussed, withholding cash payments pending correction of the deficiency, and or wholly suspending or terminating the award. Given the amount of technical assistance that CCWRO has received and the numerous opportunities CCWRO has had to resolve the compliance issues, staff has determined that there are not any additional conditions to impose on the organization that would help remedy the identified areas of noncompliance. This is because CCWRO has demonstrated that it does not have accurate timesheets available for the grant period to date. Instead, as Heidi demonstrated, CCWRO created instructions and documents that prohibit the actual tracking of time, despite extensive technical support and clarification of the requirements. As Heidi noted, staff has requested additional supporting documentation from CCWRO in order to finalize our calculation of question costs. These documents are due May 24th, which I believe is Friday. Staff will continue to provide CCWRO with technical assistance. Should CCWRO continue to fail to fully comply with all federal grant requirements, staff may recommend terminating CCWRO's HP3 formula grant. And Ephraim, this brings us to the end of our presentation with the exception of the proposed resolution. So I would turn things back over to you.
Can I just add one more thing? I'm sorry that
Sure, Heidi.
The one thing I do want to emphasize in this, and it was mentioned earlier, that we are being audited by the Department of Finance for our oversight of these HP3 funds. And so our obligation of oversight is much higher with the federal funds than it is with our state funds. And so they have the ability to come in and question our costs and whether or not we have validated these expenditures. So I ultimately, at the end of the day, we are responsible for ensuring our subgrantees are expending funds in compliance with the CFR. So there is an additional layer of oversight above us that we are beholden to. And at the end of the day, the State Bar is responsible for that oversight with the Legal Service Trust Fund Commission. So I do want to just make everybody aware that, the scrutiny for our oversight of this grant has been quite intense and multi-pronged. So not only do we have to conduct a single audit that evaluates that, but also we have outside parties such as the Department of Finance who are also taking a fine-tooth comb to these expenditures and requiring us to validate that we have done the proper oversight.
Great, thank you, Heidi. So the way that we'll do this is I'll ask our committee members if they have any clarifying questions on the report that you've presented us in these slides or in the memorandum included with the agenda. And then we'll ask you, Jennifer or Heidi, if you can present the resolution. I think it's appropriate to take public comment after the resolution's been presented so that it's part of what we're talking about. And that'll be another opportunity also, colleagues, for you all as members to ask. But for now, since we've been through a few slides, are there any clarifying questions on this content? I see, Eric, your hand up.
Yeah, so I guess I'm wondering how you respond to the communication that we received today, or that at least the committee received today, and some of the presentation we heard from the organization, that essentially we haven't been clear about our communications. Like, for example, let me just use the timesheet as an example. Do you believe that we have clearly communicated to the organization that timesheet that they submitted, that the method that they're using to calculate their time, the formulaic method, as opposed to actual time, was improper?
I'm happy to answer that. Yes, I believe that we've communicated that clearly. I've been in numerous meetings with CCWRO where staff from our office have clearly stated that it is the responsibility of the grantee to report actual time spent on the grant and have gone over that expectation.
Thanks. Jennifer, I have a question. It's along the same vein, but not too similar or too dissimilar to Eric's. So in a lot of these determinations, and as we're looking at these sheets and evaluating, I think there's one, the relativity of this to other practices within the cohort of grantees, which was referenced. Another is specifically what 2 CFR states as guidelines and whatever additional kind of Treasury guidelines were issued after that. So I know we've had that clear information as well. But I'm just wondering, as we're making these determinations, laying out and following this and sort of final assessment of what meets or what doesn't, is our council in agreement to these determinations? Have they reviewed sort of what so for us to say this will not meet the bar, have we consulted council at all as well, and sort of what's been their guidance on this in terms of signing off on this?
And Raul's here, so he can speak directly to that, so we don't have to speak on behalf of
Great.
RGC.
Thanks, Dawn.
Yeah, so I can say they've definitely done this in consultation with the Office of General Counsel. Definitely in agreement with staff in terms of the procedures that have been followed. In terms of an assessment of whether or not this supports taking remedial measures, it's ultimately a fact-specific determination and analysis. And we have reviewed what they have presented. It's ultimately a staff determination to make about whether or not these measures can be corrected with the additional conditions that were imposed or not.
Thanks, Ro. Other questions from the committee? No. Just one one final one is with regard to a point of clarification is in the presentation. We have two things going on. One is switching to a cost reimbursement payment method versus an upfront kind of grant type funding, and that was one of the corrective actions. And then we also have withholding cash. So just to clarify, currently right now, have we triggered any actual withholding, or are we actually just haven't reimbursed because the information received is not sufficient to release payment? I just want to clarify because you have both things going on in the presentation.
We are in the latter instance. They have submitted requests for for reimbursement from January through March, which we have evaluated and have concerns with, and are not able to release funds yet without those additional information being submitted. They did recently, I believe, maybe Thursday and or Friday, I'm not sure on the date, submitted their request for reimbursement for April. Those documents have not yet been reviewed, but I do anticipate it'll be a similar situation where the timesheets, sort of are the focus of the review, and the determination needs to be made as to whether or not they are accurate. And then based on additional information, we will issue payment once we have been able to make that final determination. So that is all pending the additional information we requested that's due on Friday.
I guess I'm not following. What's the difference? I mean, aren't we effectively withholding cash from them?
Well, in a reimbursement model, you have to be able to submit a reasonable request for reimbursement, and then we would release the funds. So we are still waiting for that. It's a conditional release, right? So the request that they have submitted, we cannot validate the expenditure, so then we can't release the funds. So it's not that we won't release it. We haven't said, you have to do X, Y, and Z. We've got question costs where we need additional information to validate those costs, as opposed to withholding cash for some other method. So it's more we're clarifying the information that they've submitted versus asking them to do additional things to correct it, if that distinction makes sense.
Yeah, Eric, as I said, to me, it was just the really nuanced difference between, are you accepting invoices and willing to review them, and if you can trigger the payment, trigger them, or are you saying don't even submit invoices until you correct all these things? So I was just trying to see where we at. It sounds like they're allowed to bill, but we're still reviewing that, and if there's costs, we're not going to process payment. And so that's good clarifying question. The final question I have is still related to that, is so with the major finding you've presented today, which is around what most of the cost goes to, is staff time, right? With the major finding released today, in essence, are we saying no matter what invoices they've submitted, until that is corrected, none of those invoices will be paid? I just want to make sure I understand.
So given that 2 out of the 3 employees' timesheets for the reimbursement period don't meet the standard, what my recommendation will most likely be is to switch those 2 employees to an indirect cost reimbursement analysis, because they cannot substantiate their their time reported. And there is a 10% de minimis cap on indirect costs that would come into trigger. So we wouldn't necessarily disallow all of the personnel expenditures, but we would have to disallow anything above that 10% de minimis calculation. The other employee who is charging funds to the grant during the 2024 calendar year is working exclusively on the grant. So the requirement, if they're solely working on that program, there isn't a question cost related to their time for the 2024 period. So I will have, given the way their timesheets are now, we won't be able to approve them as submitted. We'll have to either switch to a indirect cost reimbursement rate, so that we have some methodology for meeting the standards of the CFR and paying them out.
Well, why don't we move to presenting staff recommendation that they want the committee to entertain and look at. As a reminder to the committee, we'll be presenting it, we take action, and then I believe Jennifer, Dawn, Heidi, correct me if I'm wrong, this would then go to the full commission on behalf of the committee. Okay, and then so we'll present that, and then I know we still do have one pending public comment, so we'll take that after.
And just procedurally, that's why Jennifer preemptively emailed you to schedule another HP meeting, because we could not finish everything at this HP meeting like we had envisioned. So there will be one more HP meeting before the commission meets later June. So we're hoping to have some finality to present to the commission and bundle all the recommendations at that time.
And for the public's benefit, we are finalizing that, and that'll be noticed soon, right?
That's right.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to read the proposed resolution out loud. Should the committee concur with staff's proposal, passage of the following resolution is recommended. Resolved that the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission Homelessness Prevention Funds Committee determines that the materials submitted by Coalition of California Welfare Rights Organizations do not satisfy the resolution passed by the Commission on March 29, 2024, and CCWRO remains non-compliant with federal grant requirements. And it is further resolved that the committee recommends continuing to require CCWRO to submit allocation reports and staff timesheets each month in order to receive its remaining 2021 to 2024 homelessness prevention, or HP3, formula funds through monthly reimbursement. CCWRO must receive its remaining HP3 formula funds through reimbursement. And it is further resolved that the analysis staff has conducted, in addition to staff's ongoing review of reimbursement expenditures, satisfies the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission requirement for CCWRO to participate in a second HP3 desk review in 2024.
Great. Why don't we take public comment if we still have a member of the public wishing to speak, and we'll provide 3 minutes for every public comment.
Oh, hold on a second.
Hi, members of the commission. My name is Andrew Chen. I'm the staff attorney for homelessness and housing at CCWRO. I actually had lowered my hand because the point I was going to bring up is the one that staff already addressed about, me being an employee who's solely billing to that grant. That in their report they stated that the timesheets that I had submitted did represent actual time work, and that was the only point I was going to make. And then they had raised it already. But thanks for your time.
Thank you, Andrew. Members of the committee, questions, comments on the staff recommendation?
Yeah.
Eric.
So I guess I'm sorry to be confused here, so dense about this, but the commission has already put this organization on a reimbursement kind of method. Why do we need to pass this resolution? And what's the point of having the other meeting? Like what remains to be done? I guess I'm just kind of not following the sequence that we're going through here.
Sure. So I'll start, and Heidi and Dwan, if you want to jump in, please feel free. So the central clause that talks about continuing to require CCWRO to receive its remaining HP3 funds through monthly reimbursement is slightly different than what the commission passed back in March. Back in March, there was an allowance that if CCWRO came into compliance, it could receive the rest of its funds in a lump sum. And this resolution basically removes that option because staff isn't comfortable that would be appropriate. In terms of the June meeting, staff have requested additional materials that are due May 24th from CCWRO. And these materials are needed in order for staff to make a final determination about disallowed costs, as well as whether any further action is required. So that's why we need to have another meeting in June ahead of the commission meeting in order to present that actual number and those final recommendations to first the committee, and then for the committee to present them to the commission. I don't know, Tuan or Heidi, if you want to
let me jump in a little bit, because it's the disallowed cost is that's really why it's coming back to the commission and the committee, then to the commission, because staff doesn't have authority to make the determination of disallowed costs. We can give you a recommendation of what our determination is, that they won't be able to remediate, even with more further technical assistance, they cannot remediate this because their timesheets show formula, and Kevin has already acknowledged that they don't keep actual timesheets, right? It's a formulaic approach. So given that, and given the repeated nature of submissions that we don't think that they will be able to go back and actually submit actual time to us. So we're making a determination. Then it's up to the committee and the commission to agree with that determination. And then if you do agree with that determination, that there is no other technical assistance or no other support that we can provide that can get them up to then you have to then make a determination that that's disallowed. If you're at a juncture where the commission determines that there's nothing else that they can do to get them up to compliance, you have to disallow the costs.
But are we there? Are we there today? Why do we need another?
We are there today, but we don't have a number. So we don't want to present it to you all unless we have a number, because the number is important, right? Because I don't know. We don't think it's important, but I think the commission and the committee is important, because if it's 10,000 versus 100,000, I think you would want to know that before you vote to make that determination. I think on principle, though, we think that they're going to be disallowed costs. How much there is, Heidi needs, and that's why Kevin referenced. We did send them an email because we need extensive information in order to calculate that, because their timesheets were missing all of that information for us to do that calculation to present to you what is a disallowable cost, because it's going to be the indirect, but that's our recommendation to you all. Once we make the calculation, that we will let them keep the 10% indirect cost, because that's what's allowable under the CFR.
Great.
Jonathan, and I just
Jacqueline. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, the only thing I would add is I only have a portion of their financial records, so you can't make a full determination about the how to calculate the disallowed costs without some questions being answered. And so once I have the requested information, then I can do a full calculation for the full grant period to make a recommendation about that disallowed cost. But there's a lot of stuff that's really still unknown at this point as it relates to their financial records.
Thanks, Heidi. Jonathan or Jacqueline, anything on your end? Questions or comments?
No questions. I was going to make a motion, but no questions.
No further questions from me. You've answered all of the questions that I had. Thanks.
Thanks. I have Jennifer, just a clarification on the steps in the resolution. I just want to confirm I'm reading the last further resolve part is stating that because of the extensive expenditure reviews that we're doing at the moment, you all are saying that in this year, we wouldn't do a second desk audit, that this will satisfy, we're going to get everything we need here. So they won't be put through another desk audit this year again.
Correct. No, the testing we are doing is more extensive than the desk audit process itself. And the fact that they are now on a reimbursement model, we're essentially conducting a mini desk audit for every reimbursement request. Yeah. And so it doesn't make sense to go in and do a formal desk review, given the extensive review we're doing along the way and the analysis we're having to do to get to this point. And that's why we wanted to just affirmatively say that requirement that the trust fund passed would be satisfied through these activities.
But let me add that they are subject to a monitoring visit this year that will be in person. Any findings through that or observations will go through the eligibility and budget review committee, and we will share them with HP too if there's anything that implicates HP.
And then all of this to be completed and wrapped up by the meeting we hope to have in June.
Assuming we are able to get the documentation we've requested in a timely fashion, because once we get it, you know, and we gave them an extension for that request because they asked for it. It is a lot of information, but what we have to do at the staff level is not a small lift in order to calculate this. So it is all predicated on a complete submission of the requested documents by the time requested, because we've given ourselves a very short window for which to do a complete analysis.
And let me add to that, because, you know, we had given them, I can't remember how many days, and they came back and they said that, you know, it's a lot of work. And so they asked for a further extension. And then what I said to Heidi and Jennifer, let's just split the time. And then Heidi and Jennifer are going to cut into their review time to give them a few more days. So I do want to acknowledge that, because we are cutting into our review in order to, so Heidi and Jennifer are going to probably have to work overtime in order to review it, because it is extensive. So I do want to acknowledge that, what Kevin said. It's extensive because we don't have the proper documentation, and then we have to go back and recalculate everything. As Heidi said, we are undergoing right now literally an audit from DOF that's very extensive, and so we need to ensure that we're doing everything that's kind of pretty much by the book.
Thank you for that. One, that explains, I did see that in their letter, sort of the turnaround times for information, but knowing that this is to be done within that June meeting that we're having explains what is the time available to turn these things around. So thank you for clarifying that. Any other questions or comments? Oh, Eric, I see your hand.
Yeah, so Dwan, you just referenced the DOF audit, and I had a question about that. Has the DOF raised any issues with respect to our administration of this grant, or maybe it's a little early in the process? Do we know when that audit will be completed?
Yeah, so, and I'll just talk a little bit about the DOF audit, because the DOF audit, there's a couple going on now. One that's the Judicial Council is getting audited, that we're getting questions from that. And then DOF itself is doing a preemptive audit of California, because the feds are going to come in and do an actual audit. So this is a preemptive, meaning that they want to do a sweep of recipients of the federal funds in California to make sure they have a handle, that like the agencies are like us are have the proper protocols and the procedures. So it's a preemptive audit, but we've been told, like, yeah, if there are suggestions or findings, they will be communicating that to us. It has not concluded. Like Heidi said, it's been ongoing a few months. It's, from what we talked to them last, I think it's gonna stretch out another couple months, but they are in the winding down. But it's very heavy documentation. It's hard for me to describe, but I want to say between 2 or 3 document requests a week that they're providing to us that take. It's very extensive. It's like 5 or 10 hours in some instances to pull documents and provide them with the extensive information they need. And they are actually going to be testing too, right, Heidi? They're pulling our grantees at random, or I don't know what their procedure is, but they pull our grantees and they ask for like all the documentation. They have asked for extensively. They've pulled like commission decisions and then have asked us to trail it. Like, where is the commission, the logic? The good thing about us is we have a lot of processes and we have a lot of memo. So Heidi and Jennifer are able to kind of track back every decision-making point and like run them through all the logic. It's all memorialized in these meetings or in a memo. So that's all tracked back.
Thanks, Dawn. So do we have a motion to vote on
we have
the
one more
proposed
hand
resolution?
raised from a member.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see this.
It's a member of the public.
Oh, okay.
It's a CCWRO staff member.
Okay, we can take one more comment at 3 minutes, and then we'll come back to entertain a motion.
Thank you. I am the directing attorney of CCWRO, and I just want to mention that the timesheets that we're working off of was given to us by the staff of the trust fund. We were having trouble up until January. I was using a separate HP timesheet and a separate IL to EAF timesheet. And it was suggested that we combine into one and use the formula. So that is what we started doing. And had we known in January that it wasn't appropriate, we would have changed it in February and March and April and May. And so again, we're trying to do our best, but the fact that it's been going on for 3 months and all of a sudden we get slammed with, oh, this isn't correct. You can't prove your time. I have my timesheets. I know what I did when I did it. And I'm using a lot of time outside of my regular 40 hours to deal with responding to staff's request for HP. And Kevin is the same way. So to ding us because we're not, actually reporting when we are. I wasn't reporting more than 6 hours because I was told not to. Kevin was told not to by staff. So
1 minute time left.
It's unfair to punish us for doing more than 40 hours a week. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee members, do we have a motion? Yes, Jonathan.
Yeah. Before we move to make a motion, I just want to respond to what both Kevin and Grace said. So to be honest, there's some slight disconnect, and I'm not quite certain what it is or where it is, but each time that the staff has brought this to our attention, we've had meetings with both Kevin and his staff. I've been on the calls where Kevin said he fully understood, and then today he said, we're slamming them with this information they didn't know. So there's nothing wrong with not understanding or having questions. And if there is a question or if something is not understood, that should be articulated. But I don't think it's honest or fair to say that the staff is slamming them with information when this was given to them in advance, well before, and things get reported back to staff late. So that's kind of not accurate and not true. And I just wanted that to be reflected because that's just a matter of fact.
Thanks for that and for uplifting that, Jonathan. All right, so I'll entertain a motion to vote on the proposed resolution from staff.
I move to accept the proposed resolution by staff.
Thank you, Jonathan. Do we have a second?
I second that.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Jennifer, would you call roll?
Yes, Alikani.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yes, for the vote. Alikani.
Yes.
Iskin.
Yes.
Mahoney. Sandville.
Yes.
Escobedo.
Yes.
With a vote of 4 yes and 1 absent, the motion passes.
Right. Thank you for the presentation and colleagues for the great discussion. Also just want to commend CCWRO staff for always showing up when we take up items. I think that regardless of the work, and I know the tough road to do federal grants and contracts compliance, it just does demonstrate a commitment to want to deliver and continue to be a partner when they show up for every meeting. So just want to make a note of that. And just, Jonathan, to the point that you raised, I think to the extent for you all at staff that, hearing some of these comments and those raised in CCWRO's letters, to the extent possible where we can provide guidance and advice, for us to be as intentional and deliberate about it. Maybe do put it in writing or be mindful of that. And if it is a guidance we can provide that says, yes, this is the approved process and timesheet, to make sure we do that, so that at least for committee members, like to Jonathan's point, you all can show us in your presentations, right? Like you always do. This is what we provided. Here's what the guidance was. And ultimately for CCWRO to continue to see that. Our goal here is our goal is not to disallow costs. That is an outcome we don't want, but that we have to do. Our goal is to try and maximize full cost recovery to the extent possible in these grants. So I think that'll help. But thank you again for all the diligent work. And speaking of diligent work, I should probably go back to my agenda and move us on to item 5.2, which is a report on our 2021 and 22 through 2024 homeless prevention HP3 grants. And this is spending and services report through 2023. So Jennifer, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thank you. Okay, so a little bit of background. The Budget Acts of 2021, 2022, and 2023 provided $80 million total for homelessness prevention, or HP, legal aid over 3 years. The Commission made 75 formula and 23 competitive grants, or RFP we sometimes say, using these funds. The grant period is 36 to 37 months, depending on whether the grants are formula or competitive. And the grant period for both formula and competitive will end on December 31st of 2024. Grantees have now reported on their spending in some services for the first 2/3 of the grant. It's actually a little bit more, but for the purposes of this report, we looked at the first 8 out of 12 quarters. Okay, so in terms of HP3 services in years 1 and 2, staff looked at progress towards deliverables for all 98 grants. And I want to talk a little bit about what that entailed. Both quantitative and qualitative analysis is somewhat subjective because some deliverables are framed more qualitatively. Nonetheless, staff always endeavor to assess whether grantees were at least 75% of the way towards their goals. We contacted programs for at least 34 grants that might be under target or about which it was unsure. Programs provided explanations and clarifications, which staff used to assess the reasonableness. Staff provided technical assistance to grantees who were in need of assistance. And this technical assistance included things like talking through how to report correctly and whether any budget modifications were needed. And just to give a little bit more information about some reasons for underreporting, these included things like service delays, hiring challenges, staff turnover, and low demand for services. And some grantees also reported that their cases were more complex or took longer to close, and therefore required a deeper level of service than originally projected. I also wanted to note that last year on March 24th of 2023, the Commission approved requiring the collection of quantitative data about HP 2, 3, and 4 funded support center services for QLSPs. So we have this data beginning on January 1st of 2023 when it became a requirement. We have some data for a period before that, beginning on July 1st of 2022 through December 31st of that year. But that was only reported to the extent that grantees were able to provide that information. So the quantitative data analysis for support centers is not as robust, but it will be moving forward. Additionally, so now we've talked about what we would call attorney-client relationships. Those are the cases closed. We've talked about the support center services. Staff also looked at quantitative analysis for non-representation legal services. Those are services such as self-help clinics, workshops and trainings, outreach events, and hotline calls. Those are provided directly to clients as well. Those are also evaluated against application targets. Finally, staff conducted qualitative analysis. So that would include asking programs about services that are harder to count. Those could be things like policy work, things like outreach that wouldn't be quantifiable into an outreach event, or would otherwise be missing in a quarterly report, such as creating an online tool for tenants. The quarterly report is very narrow and mostly quantitative. Okay, so based on this reporting period, which is the first 24 to 25 months of the grant, grantees reported 28,120 cases closed, 464 self-help clinics with 1,732 participants, over 1,400 workshops and trainings with over 47,000 participants, 1,336 outreach events with over 51,000 participants, 181 training events, which is a support center service, 32 convenings, again, a support center service, and 1,234 instances of research and technical assistance, which is again, a support center service. Okay, so now moving on to the spending for years 1 and 2. So originally, HP3 grantees were set to receive 1/3, or about $26 million of their award each year. As the committee knows, some grantees opted to participate in the HP3 reallocation, which resulted in some awards increasing and others decreasing. So for this report, staff compared grantees' expenditures to 2/3 of either their original grant award if they did not participate in the reallocation, or 2/3 of their adjusted grant award if they did participate. And this was to ensure that it was comparing their most accurate spending to their most accurate grant total. With this comparison, grantees spent 88%, or over $45 million, of 2/3 of their total grant allocation by the end of 2023. This left 12%, or just over $6 million in unspent funds for that period. Grantees spent more than 75% of 2/3 of their total grant allocation for 85 of the 98 awards. For 10 grants, they spent 50 to 75%, and 3 grants spent under 50%. And I want to note here that if we look back to the year 1 services and spending report, spending is trending really well. In year 1, staff found that 14 grantees were spending under 50% of their award. So this is a really positive trend. And this is figure 1 from the report that was included in today's materials, and it just plots the individual spending for all of the grantees. Staff contacted programs about the 13 awards that spent less than 75%, again, adjusting for reallocation as of December 31st, 2023. Staff evaluated the grantees' explanation for reasonableness and provided technical assistance to grantees who needed it. Again, this included advice about revising budgets as appropriate. And the most common reason for underspending were quite similar to those about service issues. And again, those were staffing vacancies and lower demand for services. Oh, I'm so sorry. That's it. I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, Jennifer. Any questions from members?
I see Eric.
Yes. Sorry, Eric. I wasn't scrolling my thingy here. Go ahead.
You might be muted.
Here we go. Just an observation that is it surprising that one of the reasons for maybe a little bit lower spend is that there's a lower demand for services? I mean, given the extent of homelessness and housing shortages in California, it's just one observation. I'll just throw out a couple things and then maybe you can respond.
Sure.
Another thing is, and I appreciate all the quantitative data. It's helpful. But I continue to kind of wonder, like if you have like thousands of cases closed or whatever, how many of them were positive outcomes? I mean, do we, and I know it would be really difficult to do a really in-depth evaluation of whether we're making a difference, but that's really the ultimate question. And so do we ask, like, as part of our gathering of data, just a simple question like, how many outcomes do you consider to be positive? Something like that, just so we have just a sense for whether we are making a difference. Anyway, those are my sort of observations and a question.
Those are great observations and questions. I'll start with the positive outcomes. So we collect what I would say is an approximation of that data annually. When we collect data for the annual evaluation, it includes whether an outcome is verified or not verified. And verified means that the outcome was achieved. So if the homelessness prevention legal service was preventing eviction and it was verified, that means that the eviction was prevented. So we do collect that data, but it is done annually, and this report was looking at quarterly reports. But that is something that we can definitely remember to share when we report on the next annual evaluation. Those are not yet sent out to grantees. I believe they're due in early July, and staff will spend some time combing through that data and can report that out. It's typically closer to the end of the year, if not the beginning of the next one. And then in terms of services, I think, Eric, you raise a good point. It does seem kind of paradoxical given the pervasiveness of homelessness and people who are housing insecure in California. I think what's happening here is there are a number of confounding factors. There are other grants that grantees are using. There are services that fall outside of the scope of HP3. And in addition, there were, as you know, a series of eviction moratoria and other things that resulted in changes in the legal services that were needed and thus provided by our grantees. I hope that answered those questions. Dwan, I see your hand as well.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that because, we collect at the moment where a case is closed. And then like Jennifer's saying, it has to be verified or unverified. And so that number is going to be, there's going to be underreported. It's going to be a conservative number, right? Because if they can't verify it, even if they have a hunch, the programs are not going to count it as like a positive outcome. One thing that we have been talking about in our office, while we redo our kind of all our evaluations across all of our grants is like, because we only collect at the moment of case closure, should we, the commission and the staff, be doing something a little bit more? There are other entities and foundations and, that invest a lot of money into kind of tracking. It's very expensive though. If you want to have a program, and we would not recommend to have all programs do it, but I wonder if there is a way that we can invest in, say, a particular county and then use that money or a couple programs and then extract data because it's so expensive to, say, track a client 6 months after, a year after, 5 years after. But that's the type of, I think, impact data that is really compelling. And maybe, Eric, that's the type of data that you're suggesting. We don't do that. We don't do that type of longitudinal kind of tracking, but that is something for the commission to kind of think about because again, I would not suggest requiring it for all grantees, but perhaps there's a way that we could absorb that and we could do that for the grantees and then we could extrapolate as a community.
Yeah, I see other hands up. I'll just quickly say in the offsite we had in February, I think one of the big to-do items, one of the big picture items that was evaluation, as I recall.
Yes.
Thanks, Eric.
Jacqueline.
Yes, this is really helpful to see this kind of quantitative data. Thank you for putting this together. I just wanted to know, is it possible, and I know, Don, what you just said, I appreciate that. Can we get a very small sampling, some examples of some of the positive outcomes, the positive stories, versus some of the negative outcomes, things that didn't work out? Um, is that something that it might be possible for us to get from the grantees? A very small sampling. I think it would be, I'd be very interested in seeing that. And I think those stories, those people that we help, are especially the ones that we help, are so important these days. And I'd like to know if we could take a look at something like that.
Sure. I think that's a
Thanks.
really, oh, sorry, Ephraim.
No, Jennifer, please.
I think that's a really great point, Jacqueline. We do collect that data. We don't necessarily ask for individual client outcomes, but the annual reports do give opportunities for grantees to talk in more qualitative ways about the work that they're doing, so that all of their work is captured. I think also we do offer opportunities more holistically for our broader reporting across all grants for grantees to report on individual client stories. But I don't know if we collect that specifically for the homelessness prevention funds. I agree that those stories are really compelling. I think the tricky part there is that our homelessness prevention grants, in comparison to our other grants, already collect so much information. So it's a little hard to balance, on the one hand, wanting to get really robust information from grantees without overburdening them and how much reporting they're required to do. So I think that that's something that we can think about, especially moving forward as we think about new grants, hopefully in the future.
And I just want to add, not so much as a requirement, but as an invitation to help showcase some of the good work that they're doing and that we're funding.
I think there is the opportunity. I can't remember in which report it is, in terms of they have a good client story to share with us that we do. There is a mechanism, though. I'm just not remembering which report.
Yeah, I just, I appreciate us collecting more data, and echo Eric's point about let's revisit as we think more about it. Just one thing to share, kind of looking forward, particularly into after this year, right? In the survey is these HP grants were obviously supported through ARPA dollars. And so just curious of the work it's been able to support, not just the work, but the expanded capacity in many instances, right? That it's facilitated. Whether we might contemplate at the end of this year asking some questions about what happens after this funding runs out next year, because it's going to run out by 2026. And just, having that understanding. I know in our own in-person, to Eric's point, we did talk about how do we share some of what these funds is sustaining with other stakeholders like philanthropy and other folks. But it would be good for us as a wrap-up survey, when we're looking at this and moving into value, to just have an appreciation of to what extent will any of this capacity and services go away as a result of other funding not coming in. It might be that grantees say, we're good. We're actually have already lined that up, but it'd be good to know how many of them say, yeah, we're going to ramp down once this money runs out, because it'll have an impact.
So Ephraim, can I add to that? Because our HP funding is running out. We're working with LAC to see if there might be an opportunity in this upcoming budget cycle for them to renew it somewhat. It doesn't look likely. The budget, I know you have all heard, is really, really bad. So we are going to be going off a funding cliff for HP. And so there are programs that we already heard anecdotally that have started to like preemptively think about layoffs or starting to go through that, because it's a significant amount of HP funding that's coming to a halt with no real continuation. You'll get a full report on kind of revenue in the next June commission meeting. They're always able to use like IELTS and EF to like move over funds, but still without dedicated HP funding, there is a real kind of funding loss, and there's going to be a disruption of services. That's just, it is going to happen. The extent and how devastating that is. I think you're right, Efrain, you're right that we probably need to get a handle on that, because if there is another opportunity to do advocacy, because that's what we would want to highlight.
Well, and Tuan and I don't mean to just go into crosstalk, because I know we've got another item, but
yeah,
the other one is not only it's the funding, but we've invested significant staff time in supporting grantees to better develop the infrastructure to utilize federal funding. Yeah. So, I mean, another possibility would be for staff to think about, do we go to the state bar and say, hey, given the current budget outlook with state dollars, now that we have a good cohort of grantees that we work, are there any federal dollars, particularly competitive grant dollars, that we might apply for?
Yeah.
I don't know if any of them have the, Justice 40 applied to them, which means California is better positioned. So that's another one too, right? Like, hey, we could maybe now think with the state bar of applying for some federal grants to sustain some of this. So just the main point I think you got, which is we should ask the questions to better think about what's possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll just add on to what Duan is saying. In addition to anecdotally hearing from grantees about what the loss of HP funding will mean, staff are also very happy to offer assistance to grantees to think through ways that they might plan for that funding cliff, and have begun to do that work as well.
I hear convening somewhere in there, which is what we talked about at the retreat. All right. Any other questions or comments? This is great. The memo is great too. So if members of you want a little bit more data, there's more narrative to some of this data as well there. But I think in the interim, if there's no other questions or comments on this report, we can move to item 5.3, which is an action on our 2021 through 23 HP2 formula, and 22 through 24 HP3 and 4. A lot of HPs, 2 through 4, budget and deliverable revision requests. So this is our budget revision request. And Jennifer, do you mind confirming this is a voting item for us, right? So it's not just a report back.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Well, take it away.
Thank you. Okay, so just really quickly to go over the functional matrix that dictates how budget revisions are reviewed. Budget revisions that are less than 10% of the total grant award amount do not require approval. Sometimes we say that those are self-approving. Budgets between 10 and 25% require staff approval. That means that they're reviewed by the fiscal staff, then myself as the committee coordinator and grants lead, and then they're approved by a director. And budgets that are greater than or equal to 25% of the total grant award amount require commission approval. So we bring those to the committee first for its recommendations. So as I mentioned earlier, there were a number of budget revision requests received. I'm going to talk about all of them, and I'll pay special attention to those that require commission approval. The first is from Youth Law Center, which is actually only an 18.2% revision request. However, although this would normally be a budget that staff could approve, this budget revision request was submitted after the due date. Budget revision requests for HP2 were due by January 31st of this year, which was a month after the grant period ended. However, Youth Law Center missed missed the deadline and notified staff that it needed to submit a revision late. So briefly, Youth Law Center will have an overall increase in spending on personnel. They'll decrease attorney spending in favor of spending more on paralegals and other staff. They'll also reduce spending on non-personnel and admin. Staff do recommend approval because Youth Law Center's rationale and proposed changes are reasonable under the parameters for HP2 funding, and Youth Law Center proactively contacted staff upon realizing it needed to submit a late revision request. Next, we have HP3 formula budget revision requests. Staff received 2 such requests. The first is from public advocates for 7.3%, which means no approval is required. It's a permissible deviation. Nonetheless, staff still reviewed that budget revision request to ensure that the personnel and program ratios were 75% or more, and that all other line items looked adequate and reasonable. The second request was received from CCWRO. We discussed that as part of agenda item 5.1. Further revision is required, so we'll just leave it at that. Next, we have HP3 RFP. Staff received 1 request from San Luis Obispo Legal Assistance Foundation. The request was for 15.3%. SLOLAF requested to decrease spending on attorney salaries due to a slow project start and moving some of those funds to further support a bilingual outreach coordinator. Additionally, SLOLAF will increase spending on paralegals and decrease costs to some non-personnel items while increasing spending on technology and program travel. Staff approved this request. Next, we received a number of HP4 budget revision requests. I believe there are 7. There were 4 permissible deviations under 10% that are therefore self-approving, but staff still checked to ensure that the personnel and program ratios conformed and that all of the line item changes looked reasonable. There were 2 budget revision requests that were approved by staff. The Law Foundation of Silicon Valley requested a 17.8% revision, which included decreasing spending on attorneys and increasing spending on paralegals and other staff. They explained that they decreased spending on attorneys due to external funding for that line item. They also had some changes to non-personnel line items. Next was California Rural Legal Assistance, which had a 21% revision request. They requested decreasing spending on attorneys, paralegals, and other staff due to hiring delays, and increasing spending on contract services to clients to cover a temporary attorney's wages. They also decreased spending on many non-personnel items. As a note, their budget revision deviated slightly below the recommended personnel percentage at 69%, but this is due to the contract services to clients, which I described just a moment ago, and staff consider this a permissible deviation. Staff approved this request as well, and approved Law Foundation of Silicon Valley's request. And then finally, we have Community Legal Services in East Palo Alto, which request a 25.2% revision, which requires committee and commission approval. So Community Legal Services in East Palo Alto requested to increase spending on attorneys and other staff and to decrease spending on paralegals. They're also requesting to decrease spending on many non-personnel line items. Staff recommends approval because the rationale and proposed changes are once again reasonable under the parameters for HP4 funding. And now we're going to shift gears slightly to an HP3 RFP deliverable revision request. So we're going back to San Luis Obispo Legal Assistance Foundation. I mentioned previously that staff approved SLOLAF's budget revision request. However, the commission would have to approve its deliverable revision. As a reminder, HP3 competitive grants were awarded under a competitive bid process based on each organization's proposed deliverables. And that's the reason that staff must defer to the committee to determine if the request should be recommended to the commission for approval. SLOLAF was approved for an HP3 RFP grant for $575,000 to help clients access public benefits. Staffing shortages, significant time required for each case, and less uptake for services than expected have led SLOLAF to request expanding the scope of its work to include general housing cases, which were previously funded under its HP2 grant. So SLOLAF proposes spending $124,000, which is equal to 21.5% of its HP3 RFP funds on this service expansion. Additionally, SLOLAF is requesting to close 400 rather than 460 cases, which is equal to a 13% reduction in cases closed. So Efrain, I'll defer to you. This is the end of my presentation. I have proposed resolutions. I'm happy to present the resolutions or take questions now.
Why don't you present the resolutions and then we can go back, see if there are crowd-frying questions to the presentation, but just entertain the whole thing.
Okay. So just a note, I'll read the proposed resolutions more momentarily, but these do not include a resolution for San Luis Obispo Legal Assistance Foundation, because once again, staff are deferring to the committee. But as it's written in the memo, the resolution reads, should the committee concur with staff's proposal, passage of the following resolution is recommended. Resolved that the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission Homelessness Prevention Funds Committee recommends to the commission that it approve Youth Law Center's late 2021 to 2023 Homelessness Prevention Formula Grant budget revision request as described in staff's memo and attachment A dated May 20th, 2024. And it is further resolved that the committee recommends to the commission that it approve Community Legal Services in East Palo Alto's 2023 to 2024 Homelessness Prevention Grant budget revision request as described in staff's memo and attachment A dated May 20, 2024.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any questions or comments from committee members on the presentation or questions on the proposed resolution? Eric.
I think you're muted, Eric.
Okay, sorry about that. So no, the resolution seems fine. I have a question about San Luis Obispo and the proposed deliverables modification.
Sure.
So the memo kind of suggested that there was a concern or might be a concern because I guess this was a competitive grant.
Yes.
And that this might have made the cut based upon the 460, but now they're proposing to go down to 400. And so I guess you were implicitly or maybe even explicitly raising the question, would we have approved this if we had known that it was only 400? At least that's kind of how I read the memo. If that's not right, just correct me. But can you remind us what differentiated this one from sort of the ones that were not approved? And also maybe generally, what are the consequences of not approving a deliverables recommendation? What if we don't approve that? What happens?
Sure. So those are great questions. And I guess I would just start by saying that whether the scoring team would have recommended and the committee and commission would have approved SLOLAF's grant or for funding if they had reduced their deliverables is only ever going to be a counterfactual. We can't know that for sure. What we can say is that SLOLAF received a score that was just above the cut score for funding. So what staff can say is it's possible that SLOLAF would have scored lower had it applied to close fewer cases. I think another way to think about this is your other question. What would happen if the committee does not recommend approving the deliverable revision request? There are a few things. First would be, and I think it's important to separate the deliverable revision request out into two parts. There's the part where SLOLAF is asking to expand its services, which in general, staff, I think, would be in favor of doing, because the expansion of services would be permissible work. And in general, staff is happy to support grantees in expanding their work and spending down the grant. I think the other part is the reduction in deliverables. So if that part of the request is not approved, SLOLAF would likely underperform on their grant, which would mean that they might be flagged in future competitive grant processes as having underperformed on their deliverables. That's something that this committee in particular has used as one category when reviewing grant applications, for example, for HP4. In particular, I'm thinking of HP4 supplemental. I believe that we looked at, as a scoring team, whether there were issues with the HP2 and 3 grants. I know that some other committees, such as bank grants, also use this as a criteria to think about when scoring applications. So that's kind of what that means. I think on a practical level, what the committee needs to consider is, again, separating out the expansion of services from the reduction of deliverables. And if the committee were to allow SLOLAF to expand its services in this way, the committee could also expect that SLOLAF would spend down more of its funding. So that's another consideration to keep in mind. Did that answer your questions, Eric?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I must say it is a little troubling to go through a competitive process to kind of establish a cut line, and then into the grant, the organization that won decides they're not going to do what they said they were going to do. I don't know. It is a little troubling, but I don't know. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Other questions or thoughts? Eric, if it's any consolation at all, if it's any consolation at all, just coming from philanthropy, it's more common than you think that you end up renegotiating the grant and doing it. A lot of times because of the organization, a lot of times because of shifts in the communities they're serving, and they're like, this is just not flying, or this is not working, or something emerge. But yeah, it's not the ideal or not what you want to do. But if it's any consolation, it actually happens more frequently than you think in the philanthropy world.
But we go through this elaborate process on the scoring, and we look at what they say they're going to do. So I don't know. It doesn't sound like there are all that many consequences to not approving it, frankly, other than that it's a flag for future solicitations, I guess.
Yeah, it's a great point. Any other questions or comments? If not, happy to entertain a motion to approve the proposed resolution from staff.
Well, this particular motion doesn't address the San Luis Obispo issue that I was just talking about. I mean, I think so. I mean, I'm happy to move the approval of this resolution.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Jonathan, thank you. Jennifer, over to you to call for the vote.
Just to clarify, I'm wondering, do we need, even if the committee's decision was to not approve, do we need to put that into the resolution?
I don't know that that's the committee's decision. Those are just my reservations. The committee may be fine with approving San Luis Obispo's deliverable modification.
Jennifer, was there based on the discussion and some of Eric's points, was there a sort of amendment to the resolution language that you wanted to propose or thought we might entertain?
So staff can incorporate any sort of any sort of addition to this resolution, but I think by deferring to the committee, we would want to know what you would want that to look like, and I'm happy to write that.
Eric, do you have something you'd propose? I mean, you don't need to wordsmith it, but just in general, kind of something you might suggest or recommend we entertain for the resolution that I might address it?
Well, I mean, actually, I was inclined to vote in favor of this one, and then if there was going to be another resolution to approve the deliverable modification, was kind of planning to abstain from that. So I don't know that I'm not sure that I'm the best guy to be suggesting something here on that.
Heidi, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add sort of sort of a consideration as you're deciding how you want to approach it. Whereas for future RFP grants, and whether or not you think there's value in holding applicants accountable to what they propose, because I think it does set precedent if we do change deliverables after the fact with RFP grants. And so I just would caution the committee to think about the long-term implications of that choice, and whether or not we do want there to be some accountability for RFP or competitive bids. And despite there may not be a big instrument for compliance, for failure to comply with your statement of work, right? As it relates to your deliverables now, that might be something in the future the commission wants to explore. And so I just caution you to incorporate that thinking into your determination.
Well, what is the direction of your comment that we should be cautious about approving?
I come from a background where RFP and competitive bid processes are sacred, and when you apply for them, you don't get the luxury of changing them after the fact because it was a competitive bid process, and that where organizations were not funded as a result of what was submitted. So in philanthropy, like foundations, that might be an appropriate sort of environment, or it may be appropriate to change them after the fact. But with public funding dollars, I am more uncomfortable with allowing a grantee to change its deliverables after an RFP, after a competitive bid process, from a compliance point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the point. And I think it is certainly a valid one. I don't know that I would fully agree. I mean, I work a lot with local governments, and we always adjust those things. I mean, obviously, from a compliance and auditing standpoint, people don't want anything changed. But from a programmatic and community responsiveness standpoint, it does happen. So, I mean, I get it. I wouldn't agree that that's the way.
Well, I think the distinction for me is, well, I have zero problem with the expansion of and bringing in additional homelessness prevention services, which, I think where I'm uncomfortable is the quantity, or the delivery, or the deliverable quantification, and reducing that, I think, is the line where I find it a little troubling.
And I see Jacqueline has a hand, but I will say just really quickly, we can incorporate a clause to the resolution that says that the committee recommends approving the expansion of deliverables, but does not recommend approving a reduction in cases closed. So that's a possibility. But Jacqueline.
Wow, that's so many good points presented because it's kind of a tough call for me. Um, because things change. The economy changes, a lot of variables come into play that, you know, can make a lot of sense when someone decides to change the deliverables. I would have to put a lot more thought into it because I wouldn't want to just say, no, you can't make any changes. Um, but it's something to think about. But I think it's very important that we have some degree of flexibility because, things change that are not under, the organization's control. I don't know all of the details about, that agency's reason for the changes, but I know your staff have taken a look at all of that. So I'm willing to go with the resolution as it is, but maybe in the future, that's something we should think about how we handle. Um, Maybe limiting the amount of such a change um, might be something to consider. I don't know how often this
Good point.
happens with throughout the year and
Yeah, I mean,
years of these grants.
no, I mean, I get all these points. I agree with them. Of course, you need to be flexible and things change. What bothers me is that some people got dollars and some people didn't. And we decided to award dollars based upon a certain number of deliverables and to deny dollars, using that metric. So that it just kind of bothers me a little bit. So I don't know. Yeah, the expansion, sure, that's great. No problem with that. I mean, I would have no problem with what was proposed, but you know. Well, we could vote on this resolution. I mean, this resolution seems to be fairly non-controversial. I mean, I've already moved that it be approved, and I
Yeah.
stick it.
So
Yeah.
I'm happy. Oh, go ahead.
So Jennifer, yeah, sorry, I'm like trying to follow along and think integratively here. So remind me again, so why is this resolution only addresses two of the three grantees referenced? Because what are you doing with SLO?
That's the question. So because staff deferred to the committee, staff
You're
did
asking
not
us if
write a resolution.
if we should have another resolution.
I believe we need a resolution
Yeah.
because this was part of, or we need a clause to the resolution because this was part
Okay.
of the agendized material. So staff actually did prepare a few options. One would be to just approve everything. One would be to approve the deliverable expansion, but not to approve the reduction in cases closed. Staff could also write another resolution, however the committee sees fit, but we do need to address it in this resolution.
Okay. That's helpful. Jonathan, do you have any perspectives on this? I can share mine, but wanted to see what you thought.
No, I mean, I get both sides of it. I get what Heidi mentioned as relates to, you respond to a competitive RFP, and then there's the need to make a change. But I also get it from your side as well, having worked in philanthropy and been a funder and also been on the other side, being a grantee asking for money. So I'm kind of, initially I was thinking along the same lines as Heidi from a compliance perspective, because it's almost as if the other organizations who may not have been ranked as high as that one who was awarded the RFP is disadvantaged now that there's a change. Maybe they wouldn't have gotten the award. So I'm not certain, and I'm kind of torn.
Yeah.
two things.
No, but it's still helpful to kind of hear how you're processing. I mean, I would say I tend to feel like, I mean, ultimately there's a lot of organizations, and unless we're paying them per case closed, I guarantee you that there are going to be a bunch of other grantees who are not going to meet the closed case quota because they don't control the closing of cases. And they're not going to say, we're only going to take cases that can close before the end of the grant. So I think the expansion of services is fine. My take would be that I don't think going from 460 to 400 is a big deal. And maybe our clause is just, approving and directing staff to say they should, or just tell them, we don't want to change the cases closed. If you don't get to 460, then that's fine, but we'd rather keep it there. But we'll approve your expansion. I mean, I don't know what folks think about that, but at the end of the day, technically, it's like, I could say 500 cases, but if things don't move and they get jammed up, that's just how, legal representation goes, or cases around some of these processes. So, I mean, I wouldn't hesitate to just say, we're not going to mess with your cases closed. If you don't hit it, fine, but this is what's in the agreement, but you can reallocate the funds and use it for the expansion activities that we're fine with. What do folks think about that? So that then we don't get into the reducing cases. It's from 400 to 460. It's like, why even asking that?
Mm-hmm. I'd go with that.
I like
John?
that, Efren. I think that's a good approach.
Okay. Jonathan, would you be cool with that? So we
Yeah.
basically say, we'll approve your expansion to use the money for these other services. We don't really want to touch the 460 because you committed to that. If you have trouble meeting it, we can work with you and it'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Let me show you what that would look like.
It might not look as pretty in words in our jargon.
So that would say, further resolved that the committee recommends to the commission that it approve San Luis Obispo Legal Assistance Foundation's 2022 to 2024 Homelessness Prevention Competitive Grant Deliverables Expansion Request as described in staff's memo and attachment B dated May 20, 2024. The committee recommends to the commission that it deny SLOLAF's request to decrease its cases closed. Does that capture what the committee has been discussing?
Can we make that second last sentence a little softer instead of denying its request? Can we, well, don't erase it yet, but what I'm almost thinking about is what I thought I heard Efren say. It's more like we're just not commenting on your request to decrease your cases closed or something like that. We don't have to deny it, but I don't know. Maybe it doesn't make any difference.
I think you're muted, Efrain.
Sorry about that. I didn't realize I had muted myself. No, but I think it does matter, Eric. They'll read some of this stuff, and the staff, this is what they'll use to go back to them. Maybe rather than say it's deny is we're LTCF that recommends, or say that the committee further recommends to not consider SLO's requests at this time to decrease it, right? Something like that, rather than say we're outright denying it. But at this time, we're not going to consider it. We'll just change the expansion on it. I don't know if that would soften it a little bit. There you go, Eric. So we didn't have to deny it. We just didn't consider it. We only approved the other one. And we could at this time, it may be that closer to the grant, they're like, we know for sure we're not going to get this or something. I don't know if that has any material difference.
We could say that I mean, it's a little, I mean, we did consider it. Let's see. Well, I mean, if that's workable, I'm okay with it. If the commission with that.
Or we could just say not approve rather than
not approve. I think not approve would be better.
So that recommends that the LTCF that not approve slows. Yeah, there you go.
Sounds better than deny somehow.
Yeah, it does. It does. It does. It feels softer.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So given that, would you like to reintroduce your motion as amended?
Yeah, I will move that we approve this resolution that we see here on the slide.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jonathan. Jennifer, over to you to call for the vote.
Thank you. Alikani.
Yes.
Iskin.
Yes.
Mahoney. Sandville.
Yes.
Escobedo.
Yes.
Okay, by a vote of 4 yes and 1 absent, the motion passes.
All right. And now we are, I believe, done with our items. I do not see any items for closed session. Is that correct?
That's
Jennifer?
correct.
All right. Well, do we need to call for a motion to adjourn?
No need.
No need? All right. Well, I guess with that, this meeting's adjourned. Just want to say thanks to our committee members. It was some really hard work done today. So appreciate everybody's time. And staff, as always, thorough, detailed, and diligent. So thank you guys.
Yeah, well done, everybody.
Absolutely.
Thank
Great
you.
to see you all. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.